Richard, you had mentioned that the sort of scene where Thorin is really grappling with the dragon sickness, and that beautiful shot of speaking of the dragon, the shadow of the dragon slithers across the floor, and that was something that you and Peter kind of collaborated on together, and I'm wondering if you could share that story with us.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many moments of experimentation throughout the course of filming, but this was towards the end of the shoot, and in fact, it was in the 20-week pickup period that we had. And it was just a simple stage direction which said, Thorin sees his reflection and realizes what he's become. And Pete had said, I don't really know what to do with this. Do you have any ideas? And I was kind of hoping he'd have all the ideas. So, he built like a green ramp with a wall that I could climb, and some stunt guys tied ropes around my feet so that they could drag me down into the ground. And he said, what music do you want to play? So we played some crazy music, which ended up being the soundtrack to Lord of the Rings, strangely enough. And then he said, I'm going to build piles of jewels and piles of gold around you digitally. And then seeing the final cut of the film where he totally reimagined it and stripped everything away and took it into something really abstract, I felt. It's one of those great moments where you enjoy the collaboration because it takes you by surprise.
Lee, did you find Peter to be a great collaborator as a filmmaker as well?
Yeah. I mean, he's an extraordinarily creative person. He's, and I watched the movie back, and there are all these very different actors working on very different characters, but we're all in the same movie. And it's all on green screen too. So it's like that's all Peter's communication with all of us.
Wasn't the scar something that you collaborated with?
Yeah. I remember being in my kitchen in New York and kind of talking to Philippa about the Elven King has fought dragons before. He knows how hard they are to kill. I know how dangerous it is to wake up Smaug. And we kind of discussed that and kind of came up with the idea of that scar, which I really the Elven King on the page is not the most well developed character in Tolkien's book, but that's never the book that Peter was adapting to the movie. He was not working on that draft that was published in 1937. He was working on all of the appendixes, everything that he'd worked on. Tolkien had worked on into the 50s. And it makes a much more grown-up film than what The Hobbit is. I mean, I find him, Peter Jackson is, I could go on about how amazing he is, because you saw the movies, so I don't need to.
Well, I think we have some time for some audience questions, if anyone has questions.
Thank you for making me want to go home and cry for another day or month. I made little tissue packets with your quotes and to prepare for that too. Given that Thranduil's character can be a little unsympathetic if you don't know the back story, and you gave a little bit of it in the movie, how did you portray him so it didn't look like you didn't portray him like he was a caricature? And was there something you connected or with the character in order to make that easy?
Well, I guess I always thought of him as so different than humans are. He's more like a tiger in the woods or a great big tree that's been alive for thousands of years than he is like people. That kind of freed me up a lot to kind of, just to be other than human. And I actually understood his motivations the entire time. If these 13 dwarves come stumbling through his forest trying to wake up a dragon, you stop them. You know what I mean? You hold them back from doing something like that. And he's and another thing that Tolkien writes about the Mirkwood elves is that they're less wise and more dangerous, which I always thought was like a real key to him, and a key to the elves in general, is that they're not all Galadriel. She does that perfectly. That she's wise and powerful, but she's an exceptional figure among the elves. Thranduil is not that. He's incredibly powerful. He's a legendary warrior, but he's still, complicated. I always thought, another kind of thought I had about him is that he's spoiled by his immortality. You would think immortality is a gift, but it's also just a very complicated curse in a way, And I found that interesting about him, that it's this heartbreak that, you know, through discussions with Philippa and Fran and Pete, we kind of fit into this movie, is that coldness comes from devastation, you know, and knowing that you will live, you know, from what I've read, and I'm sure there are people who know more about it than me that in this room, that, you know, Thranduil is alive well into the Fourth Age and still in Mirkwood. He never goes west. That's interesting. All these kind of clues gave me, you know, inspiration to play the character.
Well, thank you both so much for being here with us tonight. It's been great.
Should we get these guys up?
Yeah, come on. If you got a costume, come on up for a second.
If you don't have a costume, quickly make one.
The time is upon us when all must choose which side we are on.
We cannot win this fight. I will not hide. While others fight our battles for us! They are my friends.
Will you follow me one last time?
The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, December 17. Experience it in IMAX 3, rated PG-13.